This video will show you how to do selective color in Photoshop, which means we're going to make a picture black and white and bring something back into color, ideally the thing you want the viewer to look at. Along the way, we're also going to talk about adjustment layers, layer masking, keyboard shortcuts B, X, and the left and right brackets. To begin, open a color photograph. The first thing we need to do is make it black and white. There are lots of ways to do this, but we're going to use an adjustment layer, which is the little black and white circle at the bottom of your layers palette, and choose black and white. The reason adjustment layers are nice is they don't affect your background permanently. We could always delete them or turn them off because they just sit on top of your background layer. Here is my adjustment layer. It's a black and white layer, and it has this little white box next to it, which is called its layer mask thumbnail. When the layer mask thumbnail is white, it means that the entire editing layer is showing through and affecting the background. So this entire picture is showing black and white because this is all white. It's see-through. If it were all filled in with black, then nothing would show. Now we need to use our brush tool, which is this tool over here underneath the Band-Aid. It looks like a little paintbrush. We could click it, but to be a quicker and more efficient photo editor, we should try to use the keyboard as much as possible. The letter B on the keyboard will also select the brush. So try to use that in the future. So now I have my brush, and in most cases it will look like a circle. At the top here, underneath the word image, we have a drop down that can adjust to different brushes. So if yours isn't a circle, if you have a star-shaped brush, for example, you'll want to go in here and scroll up to the top and find one of these circular brushes. Now our brush can change size. So the letter B selects the brush, and now the bracket keys can change the size of our brush. The left bracket will make it smaller, and the right bracket will make it bigger. If you use your left hand on the keyboard and your right hand on the mouse, you can very quickly, as you're editing, change the size of your brush as needed, and it will make you a more efficient editor. If you cannot see the size of your brush, it is probably because caps lock is on. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. Now caps lock is on. I can't see my brush size anymore, so I need to turn that off. Now we want to be painting with black paint. So if you go to the lower part of your layers or your tools palette over here, your colors are here, your foreground color and your background color. If they aren't set to black and white, that's fine. We're going to change it up here. This tiny little set of black and white boxes will set it back to the default foreground and background color, which are black and white. So if yours have changed, click that and it will make yours black and white. You could also press the letter D, as it's showing us in that pop-up, to do the same thing. Now we want to paint with black, but white is on top. If you like to use your mouse, this little arrow here that's kind of curved around will flip those so the black's on top. It will switch between your foreground and background color. But let's try to use the keyboard shortcut of X, which does the same thing. So the letter X moves black to the top. Up at the top, again in the brush dialog box here underneath image, the last thing we need to look at before we actually start masking is the hardness of the brush. I like to use a pencil when I explain brush hardness because I think it makes more sense. If you think about, you just sharpened your pencil and it's nice and sharp and pointy, and you're writing, you'll notice your writing is very dark and very crisp and sharp looking. That's what your brush looks like on 100% hardness. Let me show you. See how that edge is very sharp and clean. Now let me go in and reduce it to 0%. This is like a pencil that's been taking notes all period. It's very dull and very soft on the edges. I'm going to make it click there. So this is a brush on 0. So you can see that the edges are very soft. Sometimes a 0% hardness brush is nice when you need to do some fine tuning along the edges and you want it to be kind of a soft line. But sometimes a hard brush is also nice because you want to have a nice hard shape and nice sharp edge to your lines. For this project, I think I'm going to want somewhere in between, and you can decide what works for you. So I'm going to use somewhere in the middle. I'm also going to back up. I don't want these two brush strokes here, so I'm going to Alt-Control-Z to take them away. Now, making sure that my black and white layer is selected, blue, and that my layer mask thumbnail over here is selected with a box around it, now I can start doing what's called masking, which means I'm going to paint black to say to Photoshop, I don't want this part to get this effect, the black and white effect. So as I paint, this tulip comes back into its original color. Now I'm going outside the lines on purpose because that happens sometimes. If I mess up, I'm going to switch my color to white and maybe zoom in a little closer and maybe shrink my brush up to do some cleanup work with a white paintbrush, saying to Photoshop, oops, this is supposed to be in black and white. What you'll see on your layer mask thumbnail over here is a black blob starting to show up in the shape of the thing that's in color. So now I have one tulip in color. Let's make one more just for fun. Oops, I need to switch to black. And then I messed up on the edge here. I'm switching back to white. You will be much more careful in your editing because you're going to be up closer, but just for demonstration and so I don't take too much time, I'm going to kind of leave it like that. Okay, so at this point I have a layer that's making everything below it black and white except for those two black blobs there which are staying in color. Now in Photoshop, we can also selectively do other kinds of editing besides selective color. If I go into my adjustment layers, I could selectively brighten a picture. I could selectively saturate a part of the picture. I could selectively add contrast. And that's the beauty of layer masks, is it allows you to do editing on certain parts. So for those of you who'd like to take this a step further, what if I want one of these tulips to be a different color? They're all yellow, but I want one of them to be a different color. I can go into and do a hue saturation adjustment layer. And I can adjust saturation, which is how much color there is, and hue, which is what color is showing. So let's say I want to make one of them red. Okay, but right now both of them are red because this adjustment layer's layer mask thumbnail is all white. Everything below it is getting the red effect. So what I can do is take my paintbrush in here and I want to mask with black everything in the picture that I don't want to get red. So let's say I want to keep this guy yellow. I'm going to mask him with black paint so that he goes back to his original color. I don't need to mask the rest of the picture because it's not in color at all. I could if I want to just do a little more painting, but it's not necessary. So now if I go back, I have a color picture. I made it black and white except for these two. And then I decided I wanted to make one of them a different color, and that's with the hue and saturation layer. So try to use adjustment layers and layer masks in your editing because sometimes we just want to edit a part of the picture and not have the whole thing look exactly the same.